going to give Parth Brahmbhatt a little bit of interaction in Soul Guide Lantern against a graveyard-based deck that David Kuras has.
Yeah, and this is the thing we've seen from Soul Guide Lantern since its release at the start of MH2. You play a couple artifacts that sort of give you minor upside in various spots, and in this deck, Soul Guide Lantern is acting as a great graveyard hate card and sort of a bad Mishra's Bauble, two things you kind of want.
Okay, and look at this. We see Parth kick things off with a Preordain, Urza Saga, Aether Spellbomb on top. Spellbomb, one of those cards where the unsummon mode feels like it could even come up a good bit against the Oculus.
Definitely. I mean, Oculus and Murktide are both very weak to that. In combination with Emery, it's a great way to protect your creatures and keep theirs off the board. And once again, doing that bad Mishra's Bauble impression, right? Being an artifact way to draw a lot of cards and give your Emery that engine.
Okay, and it looks like David does have Force of Negation in hand. Something that this Esper Oculus deck is trying to do is have this sort of back and forth. I'll develop a threat, answer a couple of your cards, attack, answer a couple of your cards until they run out of life eventually. That's really the first piece of the puzzle for David being able to safely develop a threat.
Yeah, and Parith is going to want to really find the card Urza Saga ASAP. Here we go, coming
Good
down
news.
turn. Yeah, this is the card that can really change the whole dynamic here. And of note, you know, I'm looking over here at David's deck. There's no Blood Moon type effects in the deck, at least in the main, which means no Harbinger of the Seas means this Urza Saga is going to be fine. As yeah, we see we have to fight over this Rumble, and I love this from David. Rumble sets up a lot of what's going on with the Breach deck, so while you might think this is a card you normally want to only hit Breach, sometimes getting Rumble is huge, especially when you're trying to stop that Urza Saga chaining.
No, you're totally correct, because in a lot of ways, just like you said, I think one's intuition can just say, oh, no, you want to check Underworld Breach with something like Force of Negation. But here, let's say, imagine the world where Parth even has Underworld Breach and a red land rolled up in hand. What does that do? There's nothing in the graveyard.
Exactly. So fighting over this here also prevents any sort of mana acceleration, and maybe, you know, Parth might just have 2 lands. Very reasonable to keep, you know, Breeding Pool, Urza Saga, Preordained, and some spells, and you know this matchup.
All right, so David fetches up an Undercity Sewers, decides he doesn't want to draw a swamp, and I think we're going to see my baby hit the table.
Flooded Strand and
no,
fetch.
I think we're seeing a Psychic Frog.
Oh, sure, yes, Psychic Frog.
All right, Hallowed Fountain enters untapped.
And doing a little shuffling still, but yeah, it does look like Psychic Frog is who we're going to see. I mean, this has been one of the all-star cards from MH3, one of the early previewed ones as well, that players have really loved and really proven how strong it is.
Right, this is a card very near and dear to my heart that one of the first cards I designed at Wizards of the Coast, so I definitely have a soft spot for it.
It's a great card.
All right, Urza Saga ticks up to 2, and I do think Parth has another land. Crucial.
Massive. You really needed that land here. Notably, David does also have another Force Negation of Frog in the consider, so if you try to go for it here anytime soon, it's going to be tough. And one of the big things about this deck when it comes to Breach is it's hard. It is hard to just go for it, as we see Aether Spellbomb get developed here. I kind of like this from Parth, trying to keep the Frog off the table, and if there is a Force Negation, make it go off now and not over one of your big combo pieces. Well, like we said earlier, fighting over Malevolent Umble, great. Aether Spellbomb, situationally great.
All right, so Breeding Pool getting tapped for Soul Guide Lantern. Okay.
All right.
Little awkward to draw this many of your Saga bullets early.
Yeah, it's definitely a little tough. I mean, you're happy to have Soul Guide Lantern in a lot of spots in this matchup, just because maybe an Oculus would go to the graveyard, see an Unearth interaction. But you definitely don't really want it right now unless you're going to kind of from hand Mox Opal, Underworld Breach, you're dead.
Yep. All right, Frog goes sideways. Tarn goes to graveyard.
And
I think we're going to see a Spellbomb bounce.
yeah, I think that's what this is as well. It's really just a matter of do we want a shock or a basic, and we're going to shock.
Oh, yeah. All right, Spellbomb sends the Frog back to David's hand. See, and really, this is just cannon for the Frog. It's like it's jumping.
True.
It bounces, literally.
Yeah, it's like a tree frog.
Yeah, exactly. It is on a tree.
Yeah.
Canon events with Mason and Carmen. Urza Saga up to 3.
And it'd be interesting here. Do we want to kind of go for it while the shields are down and force that second Force Negation, or use the Urza Saga? It looks like we do just sort of want to play the Saga. Maybe we don't have it rolled up yet. Play that grindy game.
Okay, I don't hate this. In a lot of ways, this forces David to commit something to this Psychic Frog to get it through the construct.
Yep. So we get the official construct token on the battlefield.
Moxen time?
It's Moxen time.
There it is. Mox Opal. Welcome back.
Yeah, something that left Modern for many years, you know, around the release of MH1, just the Oko Urza Opal deck was just very, very good. And it sort of was like the last nail in this, like, hey, Opal keeps causing problems. And y'all at Wizard of the Coast said it's time to let it go. And we've been very excited as players to have it. As we're going to see a Surveil land here from Parth.
Okay, not so bad. Also, this construct is sizable enough that discarding one card on David's side isn't really going to cut it.
Yep, and, you know, while you don't really want to throw away your thing just to make your opponent discard 2 cards, if you can do that combining with maybe a combo in the next turn, that could be a great thing to fight through. As it looks like there's maybe some thinking going on here on if we want to cast something like a Mishra's Bauble. There's a bunch of zeros in Parth's deck, so very easy to have a lot of plays available.
Just sends it back to David, who we see a bunch of counterspells in his hand. One of the huge strengths of Versus Saga is every layer of it is uncounterable.
It looks like we are going to jump the frog, so we're not going to give the chance to discard 2 in order to kill the construct.
Well, it's probably not blocking, so I best get attacking.
True.
Ribbit. Finding a third land really nice for David. Whenever you're playing anything with counterspells, it just feels so good to be able to keep developing.
Yeah, and just keeping that card flow going, that extra one every turn, is a big reason why these matchups can be so good. So you can have things like Counterspell plus Force Negation plus something else. That really matters.
Right, and the third land even represents hard casting Force of Negation, which ain't too shabby.
Yeah, if your opponent tries to bait it out early, it's like, okay, well, here's the, you know, Underworld Breach. That can be huge. As it looks like Haywire Mite's going to get played. And now this Construct's beating down for 4. I mean, David's down to 10.
Yeah, no, Parth is winning the race, and this Haywire Mite is something else that's going to force David to commit some sort of resource to this Psychic Frog. What are you going to do, Fatal Push a Haywire Mite? I guess?
Yeah. So it does look like we're going to pass the turn back, and David's not going to do that. Just spins a Fatal Push immediately.
Oh, yeah, you have to.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the Fatal Push also answers the Construct, so David might already have one. Also might be trying to set up something, but we're going to see Spell Snare on Free the Fae.
Oh, okay, Force of Negation, counterfight situation, pitching the next Psychic Frog. David flipping over Spell Snare, Sink into Stupor, Unearth, and Cut Down. Cut Down not going to cut it against the Construct.
It's not. It can get the Haywire Mite, and like you talked about, that can be a good way to go through. Spell Snare here ensures the Underworld Breach won't resolve.
And this is the strength of these sort of threaten the combo decks. We know that Parth doesn't even have the combo rolled up in hand yet, but David is forced to respect it at every turn.
Yeah, and now 1 mana is probably going to be committed to that Spell Snare for the next couple of turns. But notably, you know, this Construct is very large and in charge.
David having a think. You know, the Picklock Prankster represents a block against the Construct.
I mean, that's actually huge.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's funny where it's like, normally you go, well, it can chump block sort of as a bit, but in a race, that's pretty real.
Yeah, I mean, 1/3 Vigilance as well, get a point in here, maybe here, there. Not unreasonable, and it is a 2-turn clock. If Psychic Frog attacks, you know, we're attacking back for 5. It looks like we're going to jump the Frog, get into the red zone. Curious to see if maybe, yeah, we'd have an extra land in hand now. Maybe we want to get an extra counter.
Ooh, and a Thoughtseize getting discarded to the Frog.
This is something I'm a pretty big fan of. Just make sure your Frog clocks in a real way.
Yes, I adore that. And I think it's very, very loud that David chose to keep a land over this Thoughtseize.
Yeah, wants to have up the mana for the rest of the game for Spell Snare and things of the like. So valuing Polluted Delta over Thoughtseize.
Yep. All right, so here's that Polluted Delta hitting the table.
Second Frog.
Picklock Prankster, back from its adventure. The second Frog pitched a Force of Negation just a second ago.
My mistake there.
But there is a counterspell hiding out in David's hand, an actual, factual counterspell. And to, you know, take a step out of the booth for a second, props to David for the 7th ed one. That one doesn't get nearly the respect it deserves.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's hard. Our round 1, we had alphas, but 7th edition is great too.
Well, okay, honestly, you got me there.
I'm just saying the bar. He slowly set the bar so high in round 1.
Honestly, poor sportsmanship on Patrick's part.
Yeah, we should give a warning for that. We'll get the judges on it. We'll head them out over that area.
All right. So instep, fetch of a hedge maze. Some surveilling to do on Parth's side.
Yeah, and grinding station here in the yard, even though that's part of the
combo.
That's
where it goes.
Yeah, that's the best place for it to be a lot of the time. It's a little tempting here to keep it on top because it does grow your construct, and maybe it eats the spell snare, but it's definitely not a real draw step. You're kind of hoping to be a little disrespectful when you do that one.
Right, it does not feel good.
Yeah. All right, it looks like we're going to move to combat.
Construct serves for 4.
Yeah. I like this not blocking yet. The construct could grow. It's also just keeping the Haywire Might at bay. So
this is nice. This is nice. And, I mean, this Haywire Might has not been awful. We were joking a bit about it being tough to draw so many of the Saga bullets early. But the force committal in this Psychic Frog has been something.
It's been good. Noticeably, I think Parth had a Mox Amber in hand. And I think is holding it to try and maybe represent either one, a burst of artifact damage, right? Like, obviously, if I had it, I would play it and try to hit you for more. But also potential burst of mana.
Sure.
Just like, okay, I'll try and do something. Okay, you think you've got me. Boom, boom, dead.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's really interesting because there's even a bluffing game going on where if his hand is just air, he's getting a bunch of false tempo by forcing David to respect that those cards could be something playable. Like, this is what bluffing looks like at a high level.
Yeah, and I mean, also, too, along this line, right, like, if you're David, well, Parth's in a race with me. We're on low resources. Parth would probably play a Mox. You can assume there's no Mox in hand, probably. Maybe another Mox Opal, but nothing that's going to grow the construct. Now you make an attack all out or something, and maybe don't play another creature, instead do something different, and suddenly you're in a really bad spot. So it's very, very interesting to see how this game is being navigated here right now.
I mean, there's even a world where something like an Unholy Heat is kind of representing lethal. If Haywire Might and the Construct can just get in for a total of 6.
Yeah, Flame of Anor, same thing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Flame of Anor, one of the cards that's been a really good inclusion in this deck. There's just a lot of wizards.
The first one does so much.
It really does. And I mean, something we did talk about earlier with Graveshot versus Oracle. Oracle's a wizard.
Uh-oh.
Draw 2. Pest control.
Being controlled.
That is a really good one here. We talked about this one sort of being kind of good in this matchup, but not as great as it maybe is in other matchups. This is the part where it's good. Well, yeah, when they have their fair plan, this is a card that cleans up. If you were playing straight Dimir, you would not be able to easily answer what's going on here.
All right. Now it's time for Parth to crack this Soul Guide Lantern. The question is how.
Yeah, I like the idea of using the Mox. I mean, that's going to be going away here in a second.
Is there consideration to Haywire Mighting your own Soul Guide Lantern?
Maybe.
Just to gain some life?
This seems possible. I wonder if we're Flame of Annoying for draw 2 to maybe try and hit a Spell Snare.
Okay. Oh, no, and you can see David going, God, is this what I counter?
And it looks like we are.
And that makes sense. David has really put an emphasis on hitting Parth's enablers.
Yep. Pop the Soul Guide Lantern, get a card. One nice thing is Haywire Might's going to gain us 2 life here.
Yeah.
So, we buy a little bit of time.
Not bad. Need that. It changes the clock, at the very least.
I'm interested to see if David wants to discard any cards to this Frog. It's currently an attack for 3 with Parth at 13. Likes the ones we have in hand.
Some of it comes down to the texture of his hand and how good it is. We know there's a Spell Snare that you probably don't want to get rid of. I guess you keep just about anything else, and so does David.
Yeah. Bad news for Parth.
Yeah,
all
right.
spells at hand.
Right. Sometimes you go, please, please just grow the frog by 1.
Yeah, just discard your hand. It's all lands. You're so unlucky. As it looks like it's Picklock, Prankster, and Spell Snare in hand here for Parth, meaning that land there was actually a great draw from the Psychic Frog because it's going to be able to stop an Underworld Breaches. Here's a Rumble. We saw it get fought over early with Force Negation.
Based on how he's played this, yeah, we see the very fast fetch from David. Probably just going to eat the Spell Snare.
Yeah, I think this makes sense. This is a great way to find the breach, and maybe you get breached, but you have Parth on low resources. Just don't let them catch up.
All right, Mishra's Bauble. I won't say it's right on time, but it's right.
A Bauble's never late.
That is the one thing it is, actually, is the draw is generally late.
Why would I say that if it wasn't true?
You know what? I take it back.
Checkmate.
Yep. Parth goes ahead, cracks on David's upkeep.
And I think David drew the one of Nihil Spellbomb.
Oh, my God.
And this is sort of why this matchup was thought to be quite good for players, especially once they added the white cards to the deck. Once you have Pest Control for the fair game plan, Stony for the combo, you have enough pressure plus disruption in different directions to really pressure the Breach deck, where if you didn't have the white cards, it could be a very different game.
And look at this, David not cracking the spell bomb, just really trying to answer very specific questions. In this case, the combo.
Yeah, and you need one card in the graveyard to typically start the Breach combo and be able to execute the win.
Yep.
So no point in doing it a little early. You don't want to see like a fetch land into boom, boom, I'm dead. I was seeing Parth try to figure out how am I going to get out of this.
It's getting really close because one of the secret modes of Psychic Frog is that you can just discard your entire hand and get a very fast 3 points of damage. And Parth picks him up. This is not their game.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of Magic left to be played. Very well played there by David. I love how much we fought over Malevolent Rumble, preventing the setup, preventing that little bit of extra mana, even at the cost of 2 cards there from the Force Negation on turn number 2. Really is saying, hey, this is the role I'm going to take. I know what matters in this matchup, and it's you not setting up.
Yeah, I really loved that navigation. And looking to the sideboards, it looks like David even has more tools for this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, David has the Stony Silence, as we mentioned earlier. We have the Nihil Spellbomb. The Harbinger of the Seas is actually pretty good. You're a 3-color deck, and it kills Urza Saga.
Yeah, really, it felt like Parth's whole game plan there was Urza Saga.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about at the beginning of the match. It is the thing you want to draw the most of. This is like one of the spots where players are excited to have Wrenn and 6 sometimes in their team or decks. It's sort of a one-card package here, where it's like, okay, I have a Wrenn and 6, I get my Saga, I do it over and over against blue-black, and then against, Belcher, I have Boseiju plus it to get a little lucky. But looking at the rest of the board here, we could easily see Thoughtseize come in. You can easily see Mystical Dispute. And this is one of, I think, the actual tricky parts of playing against the Breach is we joked about it earlier in the broadcast. Breach is one of the best decks in Modern. It's just weak to creature hate, enchantment hate, graveyard hate, artifact hate. Besides that, it's one of the best decks. But it also means it's very tempting to bring in all those. I got all these cards,
right.
Carmen. I can bring in 11 cards. How am I going to lose? I'm up a game. I'm going to have my winning it on camera. But you have to make sure your deck still works, right? And that's where sometimes players get tripped up a little bit. Now, David showed a lot of mastery, I think, in that game. I don't think that's going to be happening here. But it's something to watch out for if you're at home and maybe taking David's deck.
So, looking over to Parth's side, I know you've done your fair share of breaching. How can they make this better?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different ways to build your Breach sideboard, and a lot of different things have huge impact. So Mystical Dispute, great here. A lot of the threats from David's side are going to be blue that matter. In fact, looking at this configuration, it's all of them. So Mystical Dispute is going to be sort of counter spell on the threat and fight over your combo. Flame of Anor is a good way to kill things like Oculus, but also maybe draw little cards, fight a fight. We saw how it forced a counterspell in that last game. We're going to see Jace, Wielder of Mystery, typically come in these spots. If you had something like Nihil Spellbomb in large numbers or like Surgical. Surgical's the big one players think about, but still a Spellbomb, you don't want to have just, a Spellbomb, catch your Thassa's Oracle, and you're dead. So we're going to see Jace come in. Also, if it ever sticks, it plays a pretty good...
That's fine. Draw a card, mill 2 is a perfectly serviceable thing. We saw that a lot out of the old Pioneer Inverter decks.
Exactly. And then Unholy Heat you're probably going to see as well, just a way to pick apart the interaction from your opponent's side. And then, Nature's Claim needs to come in as an answer to Stony Silence. It's a little awkward. It's the only target is Stony Silence, and Nihil Spellbombs you could force a crack. But it's typically not in a great spot when you're doing something like that unless you're going to win the game.
Well, if Modern is your thing, but invite-only tournaments are, you really want to join us at SCGCon Indianapolis coming up, or excuse me, the SCGCon Spotlight Series Secret Lair coming up towards the end of May, beginning of June. Even more Modern to play.
Yeah, that's an open event for anyone to go to. That's May 30th to June 1st. I'm going to be there very close to my house. I love Modern, so I'm excited to play in this event.
Indianapolis, actually the last city I did tabletop coverage in for SCG back in 2020.
Oh, sure, before right now.
The energy is always incredible.
Yeah, Indianapolis is a great town. I love playing Magic there. A lot of good tournaments that have happened in the past. I can't wait for another one.
Right, always stuff in the space of Gen Con. Like, it's just a city that knows how to cater to nerds and make people feel like the whole city is on your side.
Yep, and well, if you want to look into more of that, you go to StarCityGames.com/SCGCon. You can look at more of those details, and maybe we'll see you there.
Something that sticks out to me about this matchup is just that emphasis on Urza's Saga. I think Pest Control on David's side really just swung the whole match for him in a lot of ways. I really, really like how David has navigated these games. I feel like he has a very deep understanding of this matchup, even though I think coming into the weekend, a lot of people didn't really believe in the Oculus deck.
Yeah, I mean, Oculus was it had a terrible conversion. Let's not, let's just call a spade a spade.
46% win rate or something in Canada recently.
Yeah, in Canada it was good, but in Europe there was 106 players, I believe, who played the deck in day 1, 8 in day 2.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that is a fall off that's generational.
That is tough.
That is one of the worst conversion rates I think in Magic history, if I remember correctly.
Sure.
But either way, that was before Esper. Now, to be fair, there were some people over there in Europe that did have the Esper version of the deck. I believe they also did well, but the technology hadn't really gone out then, right? It wasn't super wide known, and I think that it is sort of the way to move forward. You have to do something to change these Oculus decks. I've seen players look at cutting Counterspell from their deck and leaning in more on Thoughtseize and more cheap 1-mana interaction, things like Stern Scolding. I think that's a great way you can look at taking things, but you have to do something, and we're seeing David here go for sort of the new stockish Esper as the pivot, and I really like it. I also think it opens up potentially different sideboard cards in the future as well. Currently, we're keeping it clean and small, but there's a lot of good white cards in Modern.
Well, in a lot of ways, it just speaks to me about having a sort of generalized plan for what you want to beat and what you're more comfortable just saying, yeah, if it shows up, I'm going to lose, and that's okay.
Totally. I also think, things like this cut-down main deck are really striking to me from David.
Yes.
We want to have a little bit more interaction for things that are resolved, which is one of the problems with the Oculus deck. Stuff gets down. Sometimes it's hard to get rid of. And while cut-down isn't a perfect answer, you see some players even do things like Bloodchief's Thirst. This is just having that 5th removal spell matters so much.
All right, we saw that Jace Wielder of Mysteries in Parth's first hand, but not 6 other cards that they were particularly interested in keeping. Pretty quick mulligan, but David looking a little bit happier with his. Couple lands, couple spells. Business as usual if you're the blue mid-range deck.
Yeah, and the Breach deck does mulligan fairly well for a deck that needs A plus B plus C to combo. Normally you have an A plus B plus C, it's kind of tough, but Underworld Breach undoes a lot of that, especially in combination of cards like Malevolent Rumble.
Yeah, one of the things I feel Mox Opal did to really elevate this deck from where it was before that unbanning was that it gave the deck to a sort of one-card combo outlet, or at least some more redundancy for it, where before Mox Amber asked you to have a creature on the battlefield for you to successfully combo. Now that's not really the case. You can actually just see Underworld Breach, get back, let's say, Mox Opal, Mishra's Bauble, Mox Amber, and then go from there.
Yep. It's really, really exciting. But speaking of exciting, I think David has Harbinger of the Seas in hand.
I'm gonna keep it a stack with you. Tough segue for exciting.
I think this is a very exciting
effects are a tough one, but Tamio, now that's exciting.
I think Blood Moon effects are very exciting.
All right. Well, Tamio, Inquisitive Student, hits the table off of a channel land for Parth. Pretty loud that their hand might be spell heavy.
Yeah, it might be spell heavy, and this is a spot where, it could also be Urza Saga heavy, right? You have double Saga Otawara, something like that would be very tempting.
Yeah, you definitely keep that every time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Saga is the card you want in this matchup. Despite there being a lot more hate now from David, you just still want it. As it looks like David kept a 1-lander.
Oh. First card, Spellbomb. Okay, no, I see a mark.
Okay. The hand was flicking. I didn't see the other land. I was like, that's a keep.
All right. Tamio sends a message, gets a clue.
People tell me to do that a lot.
That was an extremely generous generalization of people.
And Urza Saga comes down, the trigger resolves, and then Aether Spellbomb comes down as well, which means Mox Opal would be online if we have it. We don't, or at least we don't want to play it.
Yeah, so something that sticks out to me here is specifically developing the Aether Spellbomb over cracking the clue implies to me that Parth really wants to try and transform this Tamio soon.
Definitely. Also, maybe he wants to keep a frog off the table. That would have been a great turn to develop Psychic Frog.
Sure. All right. Just a land and a pass from David.
I wonder if Parth had a Mox Opal and a land, which you lead on.
Well,
it's an interesting spot.
A Misty Rainforest, the first thing being led on. How about that?
Well, that's a great one. Powerful card. As another clue enters the battlefield.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, Tamio making it to combat the second time. Very loud.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how much spot removal David had, at least in Game 1. We assume a lot of that's going to stick around as here comes Mox Opal. So we did have it both from Parth, and now we have got our activation of Spell Bomb up, and we've got this Urza Saga Construct activation. There needs to be something like Pest Control coming down sooner than later to kind of clean up this battlefield.
Right, and I think that this speaks to how much respect Parth is paying to Pest Control after last game, because Aether Spellbomb can also be protective.
Yeah, definitely. Bounce that Tamiyo back to your hand is huge. This is also a spot where maybe not the best time to do it, but if David were to tap out here for something like Free the Fae, we could see crack a Clue, crack our Spell Bomb, flip the Tamiyo as well as a way to play around something like Fatal Push. We're going to see Free the Fae. I'm going to be curious to see how Parth wants to respond to this.
All right, you can see the tank. Spell Snare.
That's a good one. And we saw this. There's been a lot of fighting over these mill 4, put a card in my hand cards this game. They're really big setup cards, and you're seeing how much respect these players who are at the top of our tables and top of their game today fighting over.
And here's another land for David, maybe flooding out a bit. Harbinger of the Seas, there it is.
Yeah, that's an exciting card coming on down. That's going to turn everything into islands.
All of a sudden, Parth has never been so excited for Mox Opal to be unbanned.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to let you battle through there, and it really proves how exciting a card like Harbinger of the Seas is, because it creates an excitement moment for the other player. As it does look like
You're so right. You're so right.
Parth getting Steam Vents here. We're going to see the Saga activation almost assuredly, because it will die to state-based actions once the Harbinger of the Seas hit.
All right, the shuffle up in the tank. Maybe there's a floating of a red or a floating of a construct.
Looks like it was Construct. And remember, too, with Aether Spellbomb in play, we can get this Harbinger off the board anytime we want to right now, and we can go for the combo. So I like this. We get the Steam Vents, so the moment we do want to go for Breach, we can. And it looks like Parth, I can only see a glimpse of it, but I did see a red card in hand. Most likely one is Breach. So while that's offline right now and maybe not something you want to go for when we're so far away, it's good to have in the tank.
Yeah, it definitely isn't a bad one to have. And look at this, Tamiyo producing the third, let's just say, rectangle that happens to be an artifact. That's at least what this construct cares about.
Yeah, I mean, Tamiyo's sort of acting like both a Lord and a card advantage engine all in one there.
Yep.
Getting that huge attack in. And Parth just gets to hang out. And the moment David tries to, interact in a big way, pop some clues, draw some cards, have a good time.
And look, this fetching, this shocking, this construct crunching, and David's all the way down to 10.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we're seeing just even one Saga activation can be such a big thing. And, David wants to sort of stop things before they hit the board most of the time. Obviously, we have some answers to these resolve threats, but not a ton.
And now there might even be a world where David's feeling his own Harbinger a bit. We can see that swap going off to the side and Unearth getting cycled.
Draw a card, not bad, but not what you want to be doing.
Right, that is, you put the card in your deck not for that reason.
Yeah, and the pinch here really big, right? We're seeing how Parth is threatening the combo. David doesn't want to fully tap out, but needs to and has to sort of figure out the battlefield, else things are going to get so much worse as Thoughtseize comes down, losing us 2 life, stopping. The last card in hand was Underworld Breach, so, we got that part of things done. But we have these clues, we have these constructs. I mean, this is really tough here.
This is really close. So the Spellbomb can't quite make this lethal because then we'll see Parth go down an artifact. So he goes ahead, just says, yeah, I'll crack a clue. That's fine.
And look, you've got basically lethal on board. You're feeling good. No reason to rush it. Just sort of hang out for a second.
Uh-oh. Is it Spellbomb in time?
Yeah, we maybe drew a card that changes things. It looks like we're just going to get another clue.
Okay. I like this.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to move through your cards. You also don't want to flip your Tamiyo right now. It's better just attacking and making a clue.
Right, and this is a spot where whenever David's life gets this low, if it's going to be a 2-turn clock anyway, it might as well be a 2-turn clock where you have more cards in hand. As we see the 2 creatures hit the red zone, and I have never seen a blue Magus block that fast.
Yeah, Harbinger of the Seas jumping in front of it. David wants that mana back. And now Parth's like, oh, yeah, that's fair. I guess I have all this mana. I need to take a second. Because before I thought I was locked out of spells, and now I know, okay, even though I could do something, I don't need to.
Oh, I saw the smirk from Parth.
Yeah. Loud, as you would say.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no reason to be subtle. You know that's got to feel good whenever your opponent's sideboard card was just a chump blocker.
Yeah, and you're seeing, too, a moment where, like, that Saga is so, so important. And, you know, we even see players sometimes play it on 1 just to get the activations going immediately, even though their turns might be kind of, like, constricted to just that, because getting 1 or 2 constructs down is game-ending in a fair amount of these games, and why cards like Pest Control are so important to the fair half of the deck.
Ooh, and getting a tapped Hallowed Fountain here from David, this really just showing, wow, wish this was a meticulous archive.
Yeah, in that moment you won it. You know, it's definitely a spot where that would be helpful. Other times, though, having the untapped land immediately available.
Definitely.
It's definitely big, too. So it's a hard decision, right? Do I want my splash land to be on the archive where I'm going to set up kind of early? I know I'm going to always fetch for it versus having that access. Something that players are still trying to figure out and sort of wrangle when it comes to these surveil lands.
Right, so I know we talked a lot about this internally. Do we think Modern is going to land in a place where it's, do you choose between your first and second surveil land or your second and third? And it feels like second and third might even be the option a lot.
Yeah, especially, you know, recently a lot of players have really liked it. And we're seeing an almost, we popped the Spell Bomb and draw the card, but decided to hold it up for now.
Right, this is one of those agonizing spots if you're in David's seat where you're really trying to min-max. Okay, I know I'm behind. How do I win from here? What bases can I actually afford to try and cover?
Definitely. And Parth also being like, okay, I'm so far ahead right now. How do I want to play this? It looks like it might be a Flame of Anor, which I assume is going to try and destroy the Nile Spellbomb and draw 2 cards.
It's free to choose the Shatter mode.
You could, yeah, it's free. And you could also choose the 5 damage mode if you really wanted to.
That one's legal, but less free. Force of Negation comes down from David to stop it.
Hard cast as well. And now Parth, you know, currently has a 5/5 construct. With the Tamir attack, it's going to become a 6/6. So if we're going to play any artifact, that's a 7th.
All right. Crack of the Misty Rainforest. Can't help but feel this is going to be Hedge Maze looking for any silver card.
Yeah, not Mox Opal is the answer I'm looking for here. And we might even, you know, force David's hand here. We could play something like Underworld Breach here, and, you know, and maybe pop our Spellbomb, get a little value later, force the hand of the Spellbomb, and then, you know, we're in just a terrible spot. So a lot of great draws here for Parth. Obviously some way better than other.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. It looks like it might stay on top. I mean, if it's a hard choice.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we're thinking this much, it can't be that bad, unless we're double-checking, like, okay, do I want to play into the Fatal Push? If David had the Fatal Push, it definitely got drawn this turn, right? We're leaving it on top, though.
Oh, the untap. Not what you want to see if you're in David's seat, but Parth, I think he might be about to send us to a Game 3.
Definitely wants to.
Oh, down to 1.
Yeah, that's where we're currently looking. That's going to turn off all the fetch lands for David.
Yep, David down to 1.
Meanwhile, Parth's still sitting pretty. I mean, even if you Wrath the Skies here on the next turn, we still have a bunch of clues we get to pop. We have all these cards in hand. Yeah, and you're seeing David just forced to pop the Spellbomb, not when you'd like to and get a card, just because we've got to figure out how am I going to get out from underneath this.
All right, thumbing through, there's at least a Trump blocker in hand in another Harbinger of the Seas. Though that's not so good against Aether Spellbomb.
Yeah, Aether Spellbomb clean up. Yeah, and speaking of cleaning up, David's going to clean up the battlefield and go to game number 3.
Super interesting game, but one that really showed how strong Urza's Saga is and just how much one activation can get you.
Yeah, and our players are about to sideboard up and shuffle up for game number 3, but it looks like David wanted to check out Aether Spellbomb. Double check something on the text of the card.
All right, and something that sticks out to me, I wonder if David is actually going to leave in these Harbingers going into game 3. It's how much of that was just Mox Opal doing Mox Opal things?
Yeah, Mox Opal really accelerated there. I think it's also a play-draw moment, right? On the play, Parth had the time to develop the Saga, didn't need to have a super fast Opal draw in order to get them out underneath. Had those things been swapped, you know, turn 2, hey, I play a Rumble, then you go Harbinger of the Seas, clean up the Saga, no activation. So I do think they are a little bit better on the play, but, you know, it's also a moment where maybe the way that Parth's playing these games, you don't want to do this. I imagine it's still going to stay in.
And I think that game really shows what can be tough whenever you're playing this Oculus deck, because you do need a very particular balance of disruption to pressure, and there wasn't any sort of pressure or way to accrue cards like Psychic Frog or a Boron Oculus on David's side.
Yeah, I kind of felt like David kept a hand that was like pretty okay, but it wasn't like a good hand.
Yep.
It's one of those ones like, am I really going to mull this? I'm up a game 5-0. I don't want to lose to mulliganing a bunch. This hand's good enough, and if I draw Psychic Frog on 2, it's going to be great. And just didn't have that happen. And sometimes you do also need to keep hands like that, where it's just like, yeah, like I'm looking, this hand's perfect except for the piece I'm missing, and I have a decent number of those. Maybe I'll hit.
And going into this third game, the winner of this rolls up playing tomorrow.
That's right.
Playing for a ton of great stuff.
A lot on the line tomorrow and this whole weekend, really, when it comes to this event. But, yeah, I mean, you know, listen, even if these players lose, there's still more Magic to be played today. Lots of back-to-back win-ins, but you don't want to be the person at the dinner table who was 5-0, had their future match with Mason Clark. They clip and send it to you.
Oh, my
And then you talk about how you went 5-0 to 5-4. That would not be where you want to be.
All right, you had me in the first half. I've been the 5-0-0-4 person before, but I haven't had to, let's say, enjoy you calling the experience.
That's right. Well, you know what? We try to make magic happen here at SCG.
All right. Well, believe it or not, we've got a lot of great sponsors for this event, and that includes Beckett and Dragon Shield. I know these are sleeves that I've played with for as long as I have played Magic. I even have a couple of the first blue Dragon Shields I got back in 2004, I want to say.
Sounds about right for there. I was in middle school at the time, so I'm not really sure about that. But I know that Dragon
I
Shield
was
is
also
someone,
in middle school. I'm not that much older than you.
Yeah, I was just spelled more popular. But Dragon Shield is a popular brand and is the gold standard. Reminds me a lot of myself back in middle school. But Dragon Shield, thank you so much. And it is sort of the sleeve I always go to. Dragon Shields are the ones that I legitimately play with the most. I love them. And it's so great to see them support Paper Magic and SCG.
Yeah, I personally have over 2,000 of their art series, the Poppy Field ones, that are sort of a play on a Monet painting. I'm a really big Monet fan, so huge shout out to our sponsors, Dragon Shield and Beckett.
Yep, check them out.
All right, we are going to game 3, and it looks like another mulligan from Parth, but David's happy with a 7.
Yeah, and, you know, this is not the place you want to be if you're Parth mulliganing with your opponent keeping the 7. Now, you're hoping it's a 7 like last game, where it has some of the pieces but not everything.
It went okay last game. Parth also mulligan last game, and it's a little more forgiving to mulligan on the draw.
Yeah, totally. I mean, in general, like we said earlier, this Breach deck is pretty good at mulliganing. The card Underworld Breach undoes a lot of that, especially in combination with Malevolent Rumble.
Right, and something we talked about earlier in the round is just the proactivity of this deck. A lot of that is on the back of how many different forms of card advantage it can get. I know Underworld Breach is the flashiest, and it's the slam the door shut combo kill. Urza's Saga has done a ton. It's just a one-card source of cards. We saw Tamio do a ton last game as well.
Definitely. And I'm looking at David's hand. This is not what Parth was like. We talked about, like, oh, I kind of keep this hand. We have Psychic Frog. We have Spell Snare. We have other counter spells. We have the 2 lands. David's got a lot cooking on this 7.
Oh, Force of Negation to back it all up, too. This is just how we drew it up.
Yeah, Parth is going to need to have a Saga hand to really fight through something like this and hope David doesn't find one of those cards that can clean it up.
I've also found the Grinding Breach deck really hard to mulligan with because of how many of the pieces interlock with one another. Identifying the weakest card in your hand is tough.
It's really hard, and the games that the deck can play are so different that it really takes a second. You want to check out exactly how you're mulliganing and make sure, like, okay, normally I do this, but my hand's saying I should do this instead. So it's really tough to mulligan with this deck. And in general, it's a hard deck to play. It takes, you know, someone can play it pretty well, but the masters play it incredibly well.
Oh, and look at this, just land go. David's got to feel great about this. Dark Slick Shores versus Misty Rainforest, and then Psychic Frog hopping out onto the table.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you came to play this deck, right? Turn 2 Psychic Frog with a bunch of counter spells, super fun at parties. This is what you do.
Well, I literally was about to say I want to put this deck together. It's on account of how fun I am at parties, I think.
I think so. That makes total sense to me. As we are going to see a fetch and probably a surveil, as we do so often here in Modern these days.
Oh, look at all these Nature's Claims in Parth's deck.
You have to respect the Stony Silence. It is a card that, combined with Psychic Frog, could just end the game.
Sure.
And also, you know, you blow up a clue, you gain 4 life when they're in a racing situation. It's not like it's totally useless.
You can also force action on something like Niall's Spellbomb.
Yeah, totally. And there's a bunch of those post-board as well, so definitely makes a lot of sense. You know, the real question was like, okay, the first one's definitely happening. probably the second. Will it be the third?
All right, well, here's a surveil from Parth. Thundering Falls likes what they see. Steam Vents Shocked in.
Huge that it's not a green source. That means there's no Rumble this turn.
Well, not until all the Mox Opal and friends come out, but
True.
Tamio is what hits the table first.
And just a passing of the turn, mana up, but notably, Parth's shocked. So if you're David, you're definitely thinking something's up.
Right. What is it you're most afraid of in David's seat?
Yeah, I mean, something like Spell Snare for another frog would be pretty frustrating, you know. Unholy Heat's not really going to be on, and you can discard a card, so nothing huge there. But you see with the third land, Parth isn't going to be able to protect this Tamiyo with something like that Spell Pierce we talked about. So I don't think there's a ton besides the Pierce in an open deck list. You know, you have that information.
Yeah, Mystical Dispute out of the board is the only thing that really sticks out to me, but it sure isn't going to protect this Tamiyo from the Fatal Push as Psychic Frog gets in 1 damage, 1 card.
Yep. Notably in hand here for Parth, I do see Urza's Saga, but we didn't develop it last turn because I think we wanted to try and protect this Tamiyo and hope that David was on low resources.
Mm-hmm.
And a fetching of the white, this could be Stony Silence.
I think it might be a second Psychic Frog.
That's also very hard to beat.
Those are some of the most unbeatable draws that this deck can put out. Is it's just drawing 3 cards a turn. They're all counter spells. Good luck. All right, let's see. What was it?
All right. That's
You
why
were right. You were right. All right, this is textbook why you were so much more popular in middle school. Stony Silence meets Spell Pierce.
Yep, and you know what? It's a great there from Parth to hold it up. Also, that's why they got me in this role. You know, I see the Stony Silence coming.
That's true. That's true. All right, back to Parth, who does develop the Urza Saga.
Yep. And I like this there from Parth. You know, it kind of looked like you dispute, like you mentioned too, right? But the Spell Pierce making sure the Stony Silence keeps off the board is so, so important. And worth sort of not doing something to give yourself that time for the Stony, because it isn't free for the Oculus deck to get the 4th land into play, as we see a hard cast Flame of Anor. I don't know how many cards in hand David has, but it looks like we're going to be using some of them, and it's going to be a force negation. No discard. We could have just seen a discarding of a 3rd card to make the frog very big and beat it, which, you know, it's a very real line.
It would take so many cards.
Just 1 more. We discarded 2 to stop it.
Sure?
One.
No, I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm sorry, 2 more. Pardon me. I misspoke there. But, you know, you heal really quickly, too. I've definitely done it. I've been Flame of Anor to just discard the hand, hit you.
All right, Frog in the red zone. Card to David's hand. Damage to Parth's face, who falls to 15.
And this is a thing that I know we've talked a little bit about this weekend, but the frog, you need either a little bit more, as we see Picklock Prankster freeing the Fae, you need either a little bit more pressure with it, or you need to kind of grow it to really sort of close the door quickly. It's a good stream of cards, but it isn't going to take over the game on its own that way. But Unearth can get this Harbinger of the Seas and kill the Saga, and we're seeing that play draw on this happening here.
That's so funny, where whenever you see 2 copies of the Harbinger come out with Picklock Prankster, your knee-jerk reaction is to go, oh, thank God. Okay, can't take those. Except then you see the Unearth.
Yeah, and this is another big reason why we've seen the Oculus version of Blue-Black really be big. Unearth, just able to get back things like Oculus, like Harbinger of the Seas, be extra versions of Psychic Frog, some of your most powerful cards, really adds a lot of resiliency and redundancy to this deck.
And now, all of a sudden, Parth doesn't have that Mox Opal, so they do just have a bunch of islands in play.
Yeah, and this is a really tough spot to be as Fancy Island gets played.
Ooh. Island who shelters all. Thassa's Oracle being cast, looking at 2 cards on top. One of them either Spellbomb. That's a way to get out from under the Harbinger.
It is a single-use get out, and with a combo kill that wins the game if it ever comes down. That's nice. Now, notably, with Thassa's Oracle, you can either put 1 on top or none. It is not actually scrying 2, so we can't keep both cards either way. So you have to think a lot here about, do I want this Spellbomb, and do I have the time to keep the Spellbomb? But Oracle, it is going to slow down the Harbinger, as that's a 2-2.
Right. It's also, again, forcing David to commit something to this Psychic Frog to do things with it.
I'm really curious to see which of the cards Parth gets on top, because it was 1 top. We didn't double bottom.
It's got to be the Spellbomb,
It's
right?
got probably, but I don't know. These Breach players can get a little tricky sometimes. This Fatal Push is going to get discarded to the Psychic Frog. Then we're going to discard the Water Grave as well.
Oh, my God.
We're getting big fast.
All right, yeah, we see 2 cards discarded the Frog, just like you said. some lands, making Psychic Frog jump.
And this is a 5-turn clock here.
5 agonizing turns for Parth.
Yep, a little bit of time to set up, but not a ton. And if something like an Oculus gets found, that clock is going to get cut in half immediately.
All right, Parth down to 12. Picklock Prankster comes back from its adventure.
And that's another point of damage. That can matter a ton. You know, we just put a couple more cards in our hand, and then on the last turn, we just discard a bunch of things, hit him for a little more.
Right, that shaves a turn off that clock we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the untap from Parth. It looks like David might be thinking during Parth's upkeep. Oh, nope, there's the Spell Bomb.
All right, and now that the Frog got committed counters, Spell Bomb's a lot more effective there. Even if we don't answer the Harbinger, undoing that work means more time, and there's no swamp in play, Carmen. It's all islands.
Okay. I mean, that explains why we saw a bunch of black spells get discarded to the Psychic Frog a second ago.
Heads up play from David.
Right.
Don't have black mana, don't need black cards.
I'm always saying this.
As we do see an attack here for 4. Looks like we didn't jump the Frog this time, offering the trade with the
Loudest Nile Spell Bomb I've ever heard.
Yes, it's very loud. You could also do the very tricky block of my Oracle, bounce my Oracle, scry 2 again.
Hey, I heard from a reliable source it's not scry.
That's true. It's not. It's look and put 1 back. And that's important. Details matter.
So true.
And I really think that there's a real world where Parth is at the end of this turn going to bounce that Psychic Frog.
All right, so that was a hit for 4, and Nile Spellbomb does come down.
And one of the interesting things here is you kind of, like you mentioned, want to save the Spell Bomb for the Harbinger to combo. But the Spell Bomb might be like, hey, I actually can't beat that. Okay, but Parth thinks that he can. So bounces it to the hand. Psychic Frog staying on the board, and mana has been unlocked for Parth. So if there's something like a Stony Silence in hand, it can be deployed again before the Harbinger.
At the very least, he might just say, all right, well, I need a window to do something from here.
And Parth passes the turn back. Very loud mystical disputes.
Yeah, I literally was thinking the same thing.
And this is a spot where David might be like, okay, maybe they were just trying to get lucky.
Yeah.
I'm going to play my card. I probably also have a counterspell backup. My deck's 99% counterspells.
There's the Harbinger. It resolves.
It does, yeah.
Uh-oh.
And you're seeing, you know, Parth sort of readjust in the chair, knows things might be in trouble. An attack here for 4, down to 4.
Gosh, this is tough. Oh,
sorry.
5.
Okay, we may be going in.
6.
Might be the record for David here in a second. 6-0. All right, just 6 down to 2. No more shocking, which is big. That matters a ton if the Harbinger gets off the board, which the Harbinger needs to get off the board if we're most likely to win.
All right, one more draw from Parth. What's it look like?
Tamiyo, that's a jump blocker.
Tamiyo is a redraw. For now.
Mystical Dispute on the Tamiyo, so it can't block the Psychic Frog. And you see Parth pick it up. David moves on to 6-0, one of our first players locking up day number 2. Congratulations to him.